Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Coin Drop Podcast. This is episode 43. We have a very special episode for you today. We are talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake, the upcoming rebirth. And, it's a little unfortunate because I was actually expecting Russ to be here with me today, but, he couldn't be here. So I'm going to have to figure out how to do this myself because he has a special theory.
Damn. That's a shame he's not here.
Yeah. On what? I was hoping you'd interrupt me there, but I didn't want to tell you that I was going to do this. But in any case, I got myself caught up literally today. I started the game when it came out and then put it down for a long period of time. I beat the game this morning. Actually, I wasn't expecting to be here today because I felt like ass. I think I slept a good 6 hours during the day because I did not feel well. Thankfully, I am feeling good now, so we can talk about
fantastic. Because this would be a lot less fun to just yell at a TV or at a computer monitor without you. And I really would hate for you to miss out on this because, as the Final Fantasy VII fan you are, I think this will be very interesting for you in my take on this. So I'm going to start this episode by going over kind of one of the big main fan theories. There's a lot out there. They're all relatively the same. And I'm just going to go ahead and say this. I haven't seen anybody with the same theory that I have. No one. And I've seen a lot of them.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it either means I'm really off base or I might be onto something. And I'm kind of hoping it's the second one.
I'm gonna say that it's probably likely that I don't know. Yeah. I guess I can't say likely. You're more likely to be on topic or close to the actual. I mean, what's going on? Because the developers themselves have basically said they like where they think fans are at, which, like we said before, suggests that.
So considering, I mean, my ability to dive into the lore and the story of a game definitely has credentials. For those of you who don't know, back when we ran the website years ago, I poured myself into Dragon Age Inquisition and called the fucking title of the next game years before Dragon Age announced that it was called Dreadwolf. Years before. So when it comes to deep diving into games and figuring out the story and where it's likely to go and what the twists and turns are, I'm not bad. I'm no Matt Pat. I'll never claim to be the genius level IQ that those guys are. But for those of you listening to this podcast, I do urge you to go to the YouTube when this goes live because there is a lot of visual stuff related to this podcast episode. That being said, it's fairly obvious that this is going to be spoiler heavy.
Incredibly. So if you've not played the game, just go away now and play it first.
Yeah. So first thing on screen right now, this is a video of all the times throughout the game that Aerith knew shit she shouldn't have or did something she shouldn't have known to do. Now, that is one of the main plot points in this theory. And the theory basically is that this version of Aerith has either A, time traveled from the future, come back through the life stream, or is somehow remembering things that haven't happened yet from another timeline. So kind of the main big three for Aerith. Final Fantasy VII released an Ultimania, which is like a book compendium of Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? So it came out, I think, a year or so after it. It's an actual hardback book you can buy. In there specifically, they say that Aerith has memories of things that haven't happened. Not visions, not dreams, legitimate memories. They say it in black and white in the book from the devs.
And this is specifically to Remake?
This is specifically to Remake, correct. Okay, so first of all, we're already establishing Aerith knows more than she's telling us in the game. And it's been shown...
Kind of interesting that they would tell us that outright.
Yeah, very interesting. The whispers, right? The like spectral ghost things. There's a lot of questions around
the arbiters of destiny, I think is what they called us.
Yeah, harbingers of fate or destiny or something like that. The whispers, according to the one of the big theories, the whispers are trying to keep Aerith from altering the timeline and take her memories away. Right? They're trying to restore the timeline to the way it should be. Supposedly.
And she says that whenever she interacts with one, she loses a part of herself or something like that.
Right. So the question here is, what's the source of her having her memories? What's the cause of this? The thought is it's the white materia, also known from the previous game, the original, as holy, right? The materia that's supposed to be the counter to the black materia, i.e. meteor, right? Aerith isn't supposed to know how to use that at all because she doesn't use it, right? In the original Final Fantasy VII, it gets lost when she dies.
Yes.
Okay. So Aerith doesn't use it, to my recollection, in the original Final Fantasy. You find out that it's what you need to stop Meteor after she's died and after it's been lost, if I'm not mistaken.
Man, it's been so long since I played that original. I mean, we didn't have the podcast at this time, but when the game first came out, the remake first came out, I went and watched like a 3 or 4 hour long, like ridiculously long, like full breakdown of what happened in the original Final Fantasy VII, and I realized that I had forgotten the vast majority of the game, like extreme amounts. I think I remembered pretty much the Midgard section and then like the end of the game. Like that was about it. Yeah. So everything in between I had basically forgotten. So there's still going to be a major gap in there.
The idea is basically the white materia is somehow connecting her to her previous version of herself, another timeline version of herself, whatever the case is. Holy is somehow connected across this multiverse, is kind of this theory, right? Either that, or did Aerith learn how to navigate the life stream post-mortem the way Sephiroth did, which we know he's capable of because Advent Children, he returns through Kadaj. He's able to return to life after his death, canonically, in Final Fantasy VII's universe. So is it possible Aerith learned that same ability, and the Aerith that's in Rebirth, or Remake and Rebirth, is Aerith that died from the original timeline?
Well, given that she's a Cetra, otherwise known as an Ancient, that would sort of make sense.
Right.
And, you know, this is actually something that I was thinking while I was playing the game over the past week, is Sephiroth connected to the Ancients in any way? I don't remember, honestly.
So yes and no. He is a clone. If I remember correctly, the original story is he was a clone. He was an altered clone from Genova cells and a human individual, if I remember correctly. Okay. He's got a direct connection to Genova.
That sounds accurate, yeah.
Yeah. So there is a book. There is a book now. Not now. There is a book that was made. It is officially non-canon currently, called The Maiden Who Travels, which actually specifically says that Aerith can travel through the life stream. So, again, non-canon, but the idea is out there, right? So a couple of different things like we've seen here. Aerith, just things Aerith knew. I'm just going to quickfire a couple for the audio listeners if they don't get a chance to watch it. A couple of things Aerith knew before she should have, right? As soon as she meets Cloud, she knows he's a merc. He's never said anything at this point. Reno shows up in the church. They start to talk, and then Aerith says he's a merc. And he's like, I figured by the sword. Like, she just knows he's a mercenary. There's no reason for her to know that. I mean, sure, it's kind of weird.
He's a giant sword. Yeah.
Granted, he's walking with a giant sword. He could just as easily be an avalanche terrorist. Like, you know, or an actual soldier, right? Like, she's seen soldiers before. She dated Zack. Why did she go to merc, right? Aerith gives Cloud multiple warnings throughout the game not to fall in love with her.
She does.
Not really something you would like as like a cocky kind of thing. Like it fits her character very well, but as like if we're nitpicking and getting deep into it and like, does she know she's going to die? Interesting. Here's the other thing. Sephiroth kind of keeps traveling through time, right? So he, like I said, he comes back in Advent Children. He's in that. So they've already established that at the very least, time travel through the life stream is canonically possible. In some form or another, through the Genova cells and the life stream and all that. And throughout the game, I'm going to get into, this is my spin, but throughout the game, this is one of the things. Sephiroth has some really interesting dialogue throughout Remake. Like, things that don't fit, and then actions that don't fit those statements. We'll get into that in a little bit. So that's where I go deeper onto it. But Sephiroth does some stuff that's out of character. He literally tells Cloud to run. He tries to negotiate with Cloud. He tells him to leave and survive. He tells him to do that, which is not something Sephiroth would do. Weird.
Yeah, you don't think that he would be... Yeah, exactly.
And it happens more than once.
I mean, he's challenging Cloud quite a bit in the game, and then he even pretty much protects him at the end.
Kind of, yep. And we're gonna talk about that. Remember this line, because this is gonna come into my theory a bit. 7 seconds till the end. Time enough for you, perhaps, but what will you do with it? Let's see. That's one of the last things Sephiroth says to Cloud. Okay?
It is the last thing he says to him.
So, there's not a lot of information on what that means. The best the community can come up with is it's a reference to the original death of Aerith, because it took 7 seconds for that cutscene to play out. From the time Sephiroth goes to kill her to the time she dies is 7 seconds exactly. Yeah. It's a stretch. The community admits it's a stretch, but is it? So there's a little bit more to this fan theory. Things get a little weird when you start looking at this song called Hollow, which is in the game. And if you dig into the lyrics, it seems to be a song from Cloud's POV about Aerith. And a couple of the lines of the dialogue are foolish and blind to everything. Had I realized, had I thought, it thought, would you be here in my embrace? Almost like he's remembering, like, there's more to her, that she's going to die, this, that, and the other, right? So it goes a little bit further, and it talks about whether or not Aerith knew the future in this song. So another line of the lyrics is, with your every smile, hiding something more, dark mysteries lurking beneath. Aerith constantly smiles, she plays it up, but Cloud is like seeing through this facade of like, she's trying to be happy-go-lucky, but inside she knows where this story's going. She knows what lies at the end of this road with her and Sephiroth. But I was consumed with this emptiness, this selfishness, this void to fill. So Cloud is losing himself in Aerith in a hope to find himself, if that kind of makes sense, and ignoring the potential he's seeing behind her eyes, behind just the charming smile and plucky attitude, right?
So when you say that he's trying to find himself in her, is that a reference to the whole mind fuck where he's confusing himself with Zack?
I think so. I think that's a part of that. Now, there's some more to these fan theories. There's a lot of other evidence and thoughts out there. I just wanted to go over some of the quick points, because my theory does tie off of these a little bit, but I think it stands on its own pretty well. So, here's the first big one for you. This one.
Let me actually, before you say that, I'm going to ask you a big one.
Okay.
Do you think Zack is actually alive?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
100%, without question.
So the game definitely showed him survive where he dies in Crisis Core, right?
Yep.
But at the very end, where he was helping Cloud walk back to the city while they were walking out at that very same point, that's where I was like,
yep, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that, because that is part of this. So, are you ready? Because this one has no legs to stand on until I set this up, right? In the original Final Fantasy VII, Cloud would constantly have those like seizure moments, right, where he'd grab his head, he'd have memories, flashbacks, and we see that in Remake, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Which from the original, we know that's his memory layering with Zack, and like one side fighting for control over the other, right? Like that's what you find out through that. I don't think that's the case in this one. I think.
Well, if Zack's alive, I guess.
Well, so here's the thing: Zack is Schrodinger's cat right now. He's Schrodinger's Zack. So we'll get to Zack in a minute. We're gonna get to Zack in a minute. Cloud isn't remembering Zack's life. He's remembering his original Final Fantasy life, as well as here's where it gets fucky, as well as Advent Children.
Well, Advent Children happens after these events.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Don't worry, we're gonna get there.
So, like, here's the thing for me is like, Zack's supposed to have died a couple of years before Final Fantasy VII takes place, right?
It's actually about a year, because the timeline has gotten jumbled a bunch of times. Originally, it was 7 years, then it was 5 years, then it was 4 years, now it's back to 5 years, so it's a little jumbled. But Zack and Cloud were held in Nibelheim for 4 years, is canonically what they said. So Zack died about the 5th year, and then a few months later, after Cloud was found by Tifa in Midgar, that's when she sets him up with Avalanche, and the beginning of Final Fantasy VII happens. So Zack died shortly before the events of Final Fantasy VII.
Okay, so I mean, either way, it's still before 7 takes place.
Yes.
And so that's the thing, is obviously they haven't... Zack isn't mentioned at all in the game. And
until the very end.
Until the very end, yeah. And even still, it's like this side cutscene that really has nothing to do with the game, other than to fuck with the player base, more or less. Mm-hmm. It's like that's literally what it's there for. So that's the thing where when it comes to your theory, it's like this whole, grabbing his head and confusing his personalities with Zack's and all that fun stuff. I mean, I guess he would have to have died beforehand, but they have to tell us what the hell fucking happened. So anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. So we're going to get there. I promise some of these questions are going to be answered. I just got to lay the groundwork.
Lay it out.
Okay.
Right.
So almost immediately from the beginning of the game, this very first cutscene where Cloud is remembering Nibelheim burning, sees Sephiroth. God damn. This is a memory of when he was there. How do I put this? He's seeing this through his own eyes, through Zack's eyes. Like, it's really convoluted, but it makes a lot of sense later. So he's remembering the memory that the previous version of him had. It's this time dilation effect that's happening. Realities are blending together, and he can't tell what his timeline is versus what the other timeline is. Okay?
I can see that being a problem.
This becomes even more clear, and I'm just going to go ahead and drop the fucking bombshell now. This game isn't about 2 timelines. Rebirth is not about 2 timelines. It's about 3.
Okay.
So I just changed the background. You'll see it in a second if you're watching it on the stream. The background art is the promotional art for this game. Explain to me why there are 3 very different scenes in this art for each character if there is not a point to be made about those individual arts. Okay, so you've got
what's the it's the original timeline.
Yep, so you've got the remake timeline is Cloud's timeline. That's what we've been playing in remake, is the new Final Fantasy VII remake timeline. Sephiroth has either A, time traveled from the end of the original game right before his death, or used the life stream to pass into a new timeline, the remake timeline. He and Aerith are both from the original timeline, the original PS1 Final Fantasy VII timeline. That's how Aerith knows all of these things that have happened. That's how she knows tons of stuff. That's why she won't talk about Sephiroth. She plays off like she's never heard of Sephiroth, even though we know for a fact she has.
She knows stuff about him. So, but here's the question though: what about, say, if they're traveling from a different timeline, wouldn't there be, in that case, 2 Aeriths?
There is, actually. Technically, there is. So, it's not 2 the way you're thinking. She traveled through the live stream, and I'm going to just go ahead and rewind this back. She takes over, because she doesn't have a physical form anymore. Maybe she hasn't learned how to manifest the way Sephiroth has. She takes over this version's body.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so instead of manifesting, she's okay.
She just inhabits that body, is my guess. That's my guess. Now, there are still two Aeriths, and we're going to get to that, but there are also 2 Sephiroths. And so I'm going to fast forward here back to this scene here where Sephiroth pops up. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask the multiple characters, multiple Sephiroths, multiple Aeriths, even though they're in slightly different formats. What would have been the catalyst for Zack surviving, other than the fact that shit's different?
We're going to talk about him in just a second. So this is the first thing for me where I started to realize there was 2 different Sephiroths. And if you go back and watch, like, there's a video that I took this from by a guy named Inferno. It's a compilation of all of the Sephiroth scenes in the game. The longer you watch it, the more you watch, it becomes very clear there are two very different Sephiroths present. And Sephiroth reveals himself to Cloud in that very first cutscene, which is an imaginary version of him, possibly connecting to him in a mental way through the life stream from the original timeline. And he's trying to, much like he took over Kadaj, take over Cloud, which is why he needs him to run and survive. He needs him to escape this version's Sephiroth so that he can live and he can come back and take his body. That's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, Cloud is a certified badass, so it makes sense to want to take his body, so okay.
Right. So that's why you don't see Sephiroth, no one sees Sephiroth except Cloud, and these visions of Sephiroth are very different. Here's a bit of dialogue that Sephiroth says when you're traveling with Tifa and Barrett. Sephiroth says, "You have failed again, I see." Failed again. Failed again at what? What did he fail at? The game has just started. Has he failed because he's already met Aerith and he started down that path? Has he failed because he messed something up? Like, what? Failed again at what? Right? Failed again at what?
Lots of cryptic messaging in this game, for sure.
So, again, this scene in particular, Cloud is seeing Sephiroth. He's not attacking him. He's not fighting him. He's not being the vicious animal we expect Sephiroth to be. He's coaching Cloud. You'll become stronger through suffering. Let your hate fill you. He's trying to basically groom him so he can take over Cloud's body. The first time anybody other than Cloud sees Sephiroth is this scene right here. Palmer is the first other character in the entire game to see Sephiroth other than Cloud.
And that's pretty deep into the game. That's like chapter 15 or so, something like that.
So this is the Sephiroth from the remake timeline. This is the Sephiroth native to this world. This is the Sephiroth you fight at the end of remake. This is not the Sephiroth you see in the final scene of remake. Two Sephiroths. Okay? This is another big scene. This is the scene right here. Go ahead.
Do you think they're aware of each other?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't. That's the one thing I'm not too sure. This is the scene that tells me Advent Children. So I'm going to play this for you in its entirety. Go ahead.
Before you continue, near the end of the game, when I believe he snags Mother's body or Genova's body, it's hard to tell, and I can't remember if you find him at this point. I don't think you had. You're at the very top of the Shinra building, and Cloud runs outside and climbs up that ladder.
Yeah.
And he turns into
a clone. I think he turns into Marco 49 or something like that, right?
I think he turns into 49, and then there's another time where he turns into number 2.
Right. So my guess with those clones, you didn't play all the way through Crisis Core, right?
I barely made any ways into it, if I remember correctly.
So Crisis Core, Genesis is kind of the ultimate bad of that. There's 3 soldier first classes. It's Angeal, who is Zack's trainer, Sephiroth, and then Genesis. Genesis ends up realizing that he's a clone. He was the first attempt at cloning Genova cells. And Hollander started making clones of Genesis. So Genesis copies are kind of like the main thing you fight that are like kind of the main enemies. I'm wondering if the remaining, like Marco and the other guys that are numbered, are Genesis clones. They could be other soldier clones. They said in the Rebirth trailer that some guy, I don't remember which it was, some scientist guy, he suggested that they were soldiers going through cellular degradation, which is what happened to Genesis in Crisis Core. So if they're made by Mako, if they're made by the Lifestream and like trained that way, or like created that way, which gives, all their soldiers the green eyes or whatever, theoretically Sephiroth could kind of take over their bodies if he's traveling from the original timeline and has learned how to utilize the live stream and the Mako that binds those characters together, right? So this is we're responding to Strix.
Yeah.
He's just fucking with you. This scene right here is what tells me pretty definitively in my eyes that Cloud is experiencing this bleeding effect of seeing different timelines. So, up until this point, every like flashback Cloud experiences, he grabs his head, right?
Yep.
Every single one of them. This one's a little bit different. So I'm going to play this. There's a little bit more to this. I've spliced in some footage from Advent Children in here. So he starts off holding his head in this scene. He sees Sephiroth. This is the real remake Sephiroth. Everybody else sees him, right?
I noticed that too, that everyone noticed he was here this time.
So everybody sees him. He grabs his head. He's experiencing this seizure, whatever's happening to him. Boom. Goes to his left arm. Right arm.
Yeah, I did notice him grabbing his arm too. I thought that was a little weird, but I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah. So let me show you what that means right here. In Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, Cloud's wearing something on his right arm. Left arm.
It's been a while since I've seen that movie. It was a great movie.
Yeah, it's playing right now. So this scene happens in the church after Cloud and Kadaj, I think, fight for one of the first times. He's holding his arm again. Same exact position. And you know why he's holding his arm? Because he's got Mako poisoning on that arm. Ironically enough, he's also got a heartstring on his arm that he wore to remember Aerith after her death. So do you still think this is a little just a nothing moment here where he goes from grabbing his head and then all of a sudden puts his hand right where that heartstring is in Advent Children?
I mean, it would definitely be a good way of very subtly mentioning something that they're trying to, intersperse inwards. It's
a stretch. I'll give you. It's a stretch.
It's very far stretched, but at the same time, so like that's actually. So when I did D&D last night, I had a couple buddies come over, of course, because we play D&D, and some of them was asking me questions, and one of the things that I had said was that the game, because he was asking, like, if I never played the original, it's like, well, this is meant to be for new fans, but also for old fans, and there's enough different about it to make it interesting for them, and you can't just add some context and make it be enough. So
it's here's the thing, man. Someone made this scene. This is nothing in these games happened by accident. Someone made the conscious decision in art direction, in programming, in filming, in multiple departments to make this one scene where Cloud grabs his right arm rather than continue to hold his head. There's no other reason for him to grab his arm. None. Why is his arm hurt?
I mean, other than the fact that there's Mako poisoning, right? So, which he would have gotten through Hojo's testing. So,
but there's no indication that that's in remake at all. The only Mako poisoning we see ever for him, other than like in the past of like, he was exposed to Mako, is from Advent Children when he gets Mako burned on his arm or whatever. Which they never actually explain how or why it happened, but like, that's the only reason he's remembering that pain, which hasn't happened to him yet in this timeline.
Yeah, it's in the future. It's almost like it's not a phantom pain. It would be a future phantom pain.
But this is what I mean. This scene right here is what sold me on the idea that he's experiencing a bleeding effect, where he's experiencing memories from other timelines, not Zack's memories.
So did you, just out of curiosity, did you remember that happened in Advent Children?
I did.
Or did you watch it again recently? Okay.
Yeah, no, I saw him grab his arm and I was like, holy, that was the scene I was telling you about. I was telling Chris about that too. I saw that and I was like, wait a fucking second. And I immediately went and,
how
searched.
Did you miss that?
Yeah. That was the scene that was like, holy shit. And that's what brought this all around. Cloud is experiencing a bleeding effect from the timelines converging, a word they use constantly in the trailer for Rebirth, convergence.
How do that?
Yeah, they say convergence multiple times.
They also say reunion a shit ton too, which I was noticing. Which obviously Crisis Core is called reunion, but like still, there's got to be a reason why they use words frequently.
Right. Again, none of this, we're talking about a video game. Like, this is a project. This isn't real life. Everything that's happening is scripted by someone for a reason, right? Yeah. The words they choose, the way they say them, the things that display on screen are hours and hours and hours of work poured into it. So they have to mean something. Am I reading too deep? Maybe. It's a possibility. I'll admit that. But there's a lot of evidence that supports it.
So this whole time, ever since you changed the background image, the remake timeline, the original, and the Crisis Core timeline, isn't Crisis Core supposed to be canon with the original timeline? So effectively the original timeline?
Yes. So yes, the original Crisis Core and Crisis Core Reunion are technically tied to the original timeline. So they are the prequels that lead up to the original timeline, right? Because Zack dies, Cloud lives, so on and so forth.
Yep.
There's one thing in the remake which is a very small detail, but a very... Go ahead.
You might be getting to it.
Okay.
Exactly what's happening on that little image of 7. And so like this scene, I was going to mention at some point, this scene fucked me up. I was not prepared for it. I was like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
You probably know what I'm talking about here, and we'll get to it. But I'm now noticing when the president is stabbed, there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah, that's one thing. They didn't do blood, which is really strange.
Well, I mean, so I'll just go ahead and say it. When they killed Barrett, I was fucked up. I was not prepared for that. But if you notice here on that little image, the president's got that like ghostly thing around where the sword's going through him. The same thing happened with Barrett, but that was one of the Whispers protecting Barrett. But now that I think about it, I don't think you even see the president after this.
No, the president dies.
Like, at all.
You don't see...
So they say.
Yeah, well,
but
good point.
Barrett didn't die, and he had the same...
Well,
yeah, anyway.
Barrett didn't die because, watch, here's what's going to happen. Barrett didn't die because the Whispers came in and basically cured him because he wasn't supposed to.
He's not supposed to.
So the Harbingers of Fate are trying to maintain the timeline at this current point. That's going to change. But at this point, throughout the game, up until, I'll get to it, but up until a certain point, the Whispers have been trying to maintain the current timeline, the proper origin, because they're not trying to maintain the original timeline. It's very clear they're not, because if that was the case, nothing that happened, like Sephiroth showing up in Cloud's mind, like there's so much in the game that they're not there to protect the original timeline. They're trying to keep this one on track with whatever the goal is for this timeline, and they're failing, and then they fail big. So yeah.
Well, Aerith has something to do with that.
She does indeed. She does indeed. So all right, let me see where I'm at here on my notes, my timestamp. Okay, so we're almost to that point. So Crisis Core, there's one big thing in Remake that was not in the original, and it wasn't really in Crisis Core either, which is really interesting. Scamp, the Shinra dog, right?
Yep.
So that's not in the original, that's something they added to the Remake. Well, there's something that happens at the end of Remake that doesn't happen at the end of Crisis Core. And it's when, scene for scene, you can actually literally go pull this up. Pull up the PSP version, pull up the Remake Crisis Core version, and then pull up the post-credit, or like ending credit scene of Remake. And scene for scene, every single shot, line of dialogue, cadence is exactly the same for when he starts his final fight. There's only one difference that happens, and we'll get there. But
you mean the fight with Rufus?
No. With where Zack is making his final stand against the Shinra on the cliff there. Yeah. So we're going to get to that in a moment. But what causes that change is Aerith. We've talked about this before. She has the white materia. She has Holy. Does she know how to use it? My thought, this is the catalyst right here. Yes, and she causes the point of conversion between these three timelines. She causes the breakdown of the walls that are starting to tremble, that are failing, trying to keep these timelines running parallel. She causes them to crumble. And it's... Are
you referring to the point where Sephiroth says, "I'm waiting for you on the other side," or something along those lines?
Yep.
And she puts that thing up.
How much more clear does it need to be? You've got a black wall, and then you've got white light. Come on, guys. Black materia, seriously. White materia. Very clear. Very clear. So
it was clear. I mean, they were being very clear that they were fighting destiny at this point, right? Like you walk in and you fight destiny and you win.
Yes.
So I'm trying to remember the words she uses during this, but I do know that she effectively says that we're going to go ahead and change the course of history.
She says, it's in this scene, it's playing in the text, but she says more than fate. We're going to change more than fate. So that's interesting because now what she's done is she's broken those walls which the Harbingers are trying to keep up. They're trying to keep this timeline on track, and they've failed. So now Aerith has successfully shattered that, which has caused Crisis Core to split, and you have the original ending that leads towards the original timeline where Zack dies, and the new ending, which is why you see him now, at this moment, after she uses that spell, on the hill, and Midgar is covered in Harbingers at that point. It's not until then that we see Zack at all. It's that moment. That plays right after this.
It does play right after that.
Mm-hmm. And even if it didn't, it's time wibbly wobbly magic. But
after the Destiny fight too, it goes back to him, and he goes, "Wait, is that all of them?"
And that's the big switch.
Yeah.
So this causes that to happen. So the reason
definitely it's all coming together. Yep. That would be very interesting, by the way, 1%. But I don't believe you're accurate there. That'd probably piss some people off. But
yeah,
it makes me wonder just how different Part 2 is going to be.
Yes,
Rebirth is going to be.
Like
how it sounds to me like the first one was so close to the original, with a little bit of differences here and there, especially if you're paying attention. But now they've really opened up the floodgates for what they can do.
Yeah. So this causes that convergence. So why I mentioned Scamp is in that cutscene that changes where Zack survives, we see a second version of Scamp. That's not the same version of Scamp from Remake. It's not the same one. You can look them up. They are two different dogs. Like, in every way, they're different. I think Scamp in the remake is like a short-haired dog, and he looks like a beagle, if I'm not mistaken. And then in Crisis Core, when the little like Scamp comes across the screen, it's like a fucking terrier or some shit. Like, very clearly not the same dogs. And again, intentional. Has to be intentional. So Aerith created this split in the Crisis Core timeline.
Oh, you're talking about the Scamp dog in the like the potato chip bag that flies by the screen. Okay, gotcha.
So that's your indication that the timeline has changed.
I was wondering why the fuck they did that. That made no sense to me. I was like, what the hell was that about? My son was watching, goes, hey, a doggy. It's like, it was on a chip bag, Yep.
So that's what causes that change. That's ultimately like, because timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly shit, right? It doesn't matter when that event happens, it echoes throughout time and space. So that's what's causing Cloud to experience the bleeding effect, where he's experiencing memories that are from the original timeline, memories that haven't happened yet. It's why there's two Sephiroths, but this happens as a result of being two Sephiroths and Aerith being pushed to this point where she has to do this. It explains why there's literally going to be, factually has to be, 2 Buster Swords and 2 Clouds in Rebirth. Because now Zack has survived and Cloud is alive.
But what about the them like effectively walking through each other and not seeing each other?
That one I'm not too sure. I think that's a passing. I think it's that wall coming down. So I think it's an artistic way of explaining that like their paths have crossed and now they exist in this like thinned reality where their timelines are merged, which leads me to
or maybe that's where they're merging, and therefore that's why they can't see each other.
Because Cloud and Zack are coming in to
the same reality again. Basically,
they're coming into the remake timeline because he survived, basically. So Zack is both dead and alive. The original Zack, the one Cloud knew, is dead. This version of Zack is alive with a Cloud that survived. Like, it gets real fucking weird. But when you just wrap your head around the fact that there's 2 Aeriths now, too, because we see that in the Games Fest trailer. We see a very weird opening that shows... they show, like, the aftermath of the plate falling... What?
When you say Games Fest, do you mean the PlayStation Showcase that was recently?
No, this one's the older one from 2023. The Games Fest 2023 trailer. If you look it up, it starts out with a scene that makes no fucking sense because it shows the aftermath of an explosion, and you see Red 13, Barrett, Tifa, and Aerith get loaded onto a Shinra helicopter, and they're all very clearly.
Oh yeah, they're all What the fuck? I do remember that. Yeah,
that is this new timeline. That is Zack's new reality.
I see. Like when I saw that, I actually kind of was thinking more of Advent Children. Because that scene just felt like Advent Children to me.
But that's Zack's timeline.
That's a good point.
That's this new timeline that Zack's existing in. He's coming into the city after the explosion, which we literally see it on screen. You'll see it here in a little bit.
Yeah, a giant explosion happens. He gets knocked on his ass after he survives. Yeah.
So he's coming in. So now there is literally two of everybody. There's two. Technically, there's two Tifas. There's two Barretts because we're existing in this weird Yeah, dude, it's gonna get weird. It's gonna get weird if I'm right because there's this weird overlapping happening where the veil between these timelines have shifted.
You think it's going to be anything like 1%? Just said.
LOL. This is making me. Someone touches the alternate version. Yeah, so let's hope we don't get any paradoxical explosions when somebody touches each other. So this kind of explains how there are literally, and again, even in the promotional art, we've got two versions of the same sword. We've got paradoxical weapons that exist.
Yeah, they both have the Buster Sword, yeah.
And we know that this is remake timeline because we see Aerith's mother. We see the reporter in the cutscene when he comes in one of the trailers. When Zack comes back into Midgar, he asks her to watch Cloud. Like, we know that this is happening in the same space as remake. Like, it just has to be. So you've got how far they go, I don't know, but like it kind of spells it out to me that there's these three convergences.
So what do you make of the fact that Zack was alone when he was fighting all these people and survives, but then when he makes it back to Midgard, suddenly he's holding Cloud?
Well, Cloud What's up with that? So Cloud was with him. When you play through remake, when you play through reunion, this whole section leading up to that is after what happens at Nibelheim when you escape. He's literally carrying Cloud back to Midgard the entire time. So he's just got.
So this is Crisis Core story, but. Like I said, if you haven't played it, when this happens in there, all you see is Zack. And he's sort of like talking to Cloud, but it seems like one of those things where he's talking to him, but Cloud's not there. But I guess he's just laying down somewhere or whatever.
Yeah, so the way the scene actually plays out from Reunion and the original Crisis Core, if I remember correctly, is basically at this point, Zack literally just has a catatonic Cloud on his back and he's carrying him, and he ends up setting him down next to a rock outcropping near this hill, which is his last stand kind of thing. And he's like, all right, Cloud, stay here. I'm going to go scout ahead. And that's when that scene happens where all those Shinra troops are there and he has his last stand fight. So Cloud is there. He's just incapacitated in a corner. Yeah. And everybody, I would assume, thinks he's dead because he looks dead, to be honest. Hello, bro. But this means there's a scene where Zack gets a realization and sees every vision he gets. Yeah, every version. Every version he gets murked in. Yeah. So Cloud is there. He just
you just don't see it in the remake. Okay.
Right. That's how Cloud's there as well. It's Cloud from the Crisis Core timeline now entering the remake timeline with Zack.
So in the remake, not the remake. I'm sorry. In the Crisis Core, he dies.
Yes.
Zack just gets up and walks back to town or something.
But in Crisis Core remake, Zack dies, and then Aerith using Holy is what causes this split in the Crisis Core timeline, and like breaks that wall, creating the split where he survives and is now in the remake timeline. Why Scamp is different is still a confusing fucking mess to me. The only thing I can think is he's like a parallel, like if we're gonna call it like driving lanes, right? Remake is the fast lane, Crisis Core is the slow lane. Crisis Core, that split now brought him over one lane. So he's not quite in the remake timeline. I don't know, like there's gotta be a reason they cast Scamp differently, and I really don't know what it is.
For those curious of the difference, those are your two different Scamps right there.
Yeah, they are two.
The one with the, I don't know, the one that's lighter, the one This one. That's the new one.
Yeah, the Harrier one is the is the Crisis Core split version, and the other one is the one you see in Remake the whole time. I don't know. That's where I'm just like, I don't fucking know how they're doing this, but like that's what makes sense to me is that there's these 3 timelines and they're converging. Sephiroth is coming back, like technically the original timeline isn't merging. They've just traveled from that to the Remake timeline, Aerith and Sephiroth, to try and change fate, right? So Sephiroth came so he would win, Aerith came to stop him. And then by Aerith doing shit with Holy, she caused a split in the Crisis Core timeline, and now Zack is coming in. That's the best way I can explain it.
So when me, you, and Mike mused on what was going on, we were kind of accurate.
A little bit, yeah. I think so.
A little bit.
So here's this scene here is also really important because up until this scene, I believe the Harbingers were actually trying to keep the Remake timeline on track with whatever fate was determining. This scene shows Sephiroth basically like straight up absorb the Harbingers of Fate. And from this moment on, he uses them in the fight against Cloud and the rest of the team. Like, straight up puts them to work to fight and bring his will in. This Sephiroth that you fight is the Remake Sephiroth. This is not the original timeline Sephiroth. So you gotta remember, like, it's weird, because, see, this is the Sephiroth.
2 of them, but they almost seem to be
here's the
unbeknownst to each other.
I don't think the original Sephiroth is able to manifest physically yet. I think he only exists, like they kind of hinted at in Advent Children, he only exists in Cloud's mind. That's the only thing I can think, because after you fight Sephiroth here, you go to what was it called? The fucking Edge of Eternity, Edge of Creation, End of Creation. That's what it was.
Creation,
yeah. You go to the End of Creation and you see Sephiroth again. Here's how I know that that's the original Sephiroth. Dude dispatches Cloud like he's a 2-year-old. Sephiroth doesn't move, like, at all for that fight. You are clearly outmatched against that version of Sephiroth. Like, dude doesn't even try. You're telling me I just whooped this man's ass and now he just like, just blocked every single attack I do? Different guy. So I think Sephiroth from the original timeline is trying to get Cloud to survive and make him angry and full of hate so that he can remanifest himself in Cloud and take on his Strix.
Yep, I saw it. We're gonna have to clip that one for YouTube.
Yep. I think he's trying to take over Cloud's body. I think that's the goal. Just like he does Kadaj in the future, I think that's his plan, is to try and groom Cloud into being a vessel for Sephiroth's return.
I do think that essentially hate's going to make it the catalyst, I guess, if
there's a lot
Cloud
of
becomes angry enough or I don't know.
I don't know. There's so much
state of mind.
There's so much dialogue between him and Sephiroth about hate and suffering and pain and giving in. And so, like, here it is, right here. He just goes through this random wormhole, and all of a sudden he's at the end of creation. What the fuck does that mean? How does he just teleport through? No, this is in his brain.
Yeah, I mean,
this is 100% in his brain.
That sequence where you're going through essentially a black hole or something along those lines is often not referred to but inferent of time. Usually time is passing by really quickly, or you're going back in time or something or other.
Yeah,
so that's definitely good.
Yeah, this Sephiroth is the Sephiroth from the original timeline. That which lies ahead does not yet exist. Our world will become part of it one day. One day. He's telling you about the convergence. He's telling you these timelines are merging right here. He's telling you this is the end. This is where everything comes together. And
you're saying this is the OG, the original timeline.
This is the original Sephiroth. At the edge of creation, he tells you how long it took him to kill Aerith. He tells you 7 seconds till the end. Time for you, perhaps. Time enough for you, perhaps. But what will you do with it? Let's see. Those are his last words to Cloud. He is telling him that the Sephiroth in his time is going to kill Aerith. And that Cloud can stop it. But will he? How will he?
I mean, it almost seems like a it's a strange thing for him to effectively tell him how to stop it when you'd think that's what he doesn't want, given Aerith is the one that's changing destiny, right?
I think dude, I think things are so interlaced. I have no idea. I also think that like Sephiroth is a twisted dude. So it almost makes me think that like he knows Cloud can't stop it, and by telling him 7 seconds, he gives him the hope that he can, only for so many of us that are so hoping that we can change the fate of Aerith to fail and become a new vessel for Sephiroth, for this version of Sephiroth.
They have to find a way to make that scene hit just as hard, right? So in hopes that we can stop it. But also at the same time, that was one of the things that we mused about, me, you, and Mike have been mused about, was that Sephiroth is so powerful that he's just desperate for someone that can give him a challenge.
Right.
And so giving that knowledge to potentially make it a challenge, then why not, I guess.
Yeah. I think... Here's kind of my thought. They've said that your events in Rebirth will change Aerith's fate. They said that in their latest demo. They came out and said it flat, black and white.
In the Rebirth demo that I can download right now?
Not in the demo, in the state of play, excuse me. They said that in the state of play and in the trailers. I think they mention it. But in the newest trailers too, there's also a ton of mentions of the world will survive, but will you? The world will survive, but will you? So I think what's going to end up happening, and this is a stretch, I'll admit, I think Cloud is going to end up becoming a new vessel for Sephiroth if you choose to save Aerith. If that's the path you go, Cloud ends up becoming the bad guy. And
I think there might be choices. It might be a choice-driven game.
I don't know if the game ultimately is going to... Technically, the first one was, right? Remake, depending on how you interacted with Tifa or Aerith, depended on who your date was for the Corneo scene. It also, like, your actions around Wall Market changed the outfits. Like, there's already choices in this game. You already have some impact. And there was in the original, too. You could choose, like, based on how you talked to, what you did, you could choose, like, the infamous date scene to the Golden Saucer. You could end up going with Aerith. You could end up going with Tifa. You could end up going with Barrett, which is hilarious. I love that scene. It's so...
in the remake?
Yeah, no, in the original. You could...
Oh, in the original. In the original.
Yeah, it's fucking funny. But there's already choices in the game. They've established that. So,
but will they actually have an effect on the story is the real question.
A big impact, right? So
yeah.
This is the scene right here where basically this is the split, and now we're seeing that Zack has survived his encounter with Shinra, which was supposed to be his end at the end of Crisis Core. That's where he was supposed to die. There's our view of Scamp, which is not the same Scamp, and yet he stands. So this is that merge of these timelines. The only thing I can think is that he is now in the remake timeline. It's the only thing that makes sense. Why Scamp is different is still fucking boggling my mind, and I don't have an answer. But that's the only thing that makes sense, is that this is a new timeline merged with the remake timeline.
And so there being two Clouds, the remake Cloud is going to become the bad guy. Sephiroth is going to take over him, and then the OG or the Crisis Core Cloud will be
either that.
The good Cloud?
Either that, or the Crisis Core Cloud never really recovers, and Zack ends up being the hero of the game.
Which is what a lot of people would be happy about, to say the least.
Yeah. That's my thought. That's how I see the story playing out, or one potential option, right? I think the story is going to play out, just to kind of bring it all home. Your actions in Rebirth are going to determine whether or not Aerith survives. If she does... I think...
Didn't they already confirm that Rebirth is going to end after her original death?
I think so. I don't recall.
Yeah, so that scene should take place in this next game.
Yeah. I think that's going to be the big cliffhanger for part 2, is that either Aerith dies or Cloud becomes Sephiroth. Like, I think that's the big kick. And then Zack is left to be kind of the hero of the game if you do that. The big issue there is that drastically changes the third game based on the results of the second game. Drastically. That'd
be a very, very big difference. So the real question is so away from the storyline of Final Fantasy VII, when games have tried to interconnect separate games, there's usually a limited facet that they can manage that. Like a perfect example, and this has pissed me off ever since it was the case, was in Mass Effect. At the end of Mass Effect 2, you can die if you don't do things right. Your Commander Shepard can die. When 3 picks up, they suppose that you didn't choose that route.
Right.
They basically just said that if you don't like it, sorry, you shouldn't have died. Just do it again or whatever. And so, do you think they would give you that choice in this? To effectively have those two options, and then the third game will pick up wherever your save ended? Or are they going to choose one and go with that?
Here's the thing. If they're going to go the route I think they're going to go, they have no choice but to let you import your save and your choices into the next game to continue it from where you personally left off. And it wouldn't be the first game to do that. Dragon Age has done that for 3 games. Your actions in the first game can be imported into 2, and while they're mostly background information, they do ultimately make some impact on the second game, and both of those games significantly impact Inquisition. Significantly. Not to the scale that this would be, to the point where you're literally changing protagonists, but like it raises a lot of questions, right? So like it doesn't answer a ton of questions. Okay, well now there's 2 Sephiroths, right? You've got the original timeline Sephiroth now taking over Cloud's body. What happens to the current remake Sephiroth? Where's he in all this? What goes on with those 2? Do they fight? Is this the fight Sephiroth's really looking for? He wants the strongest warrior he can possibly have. Who's stronger than him?
Himself.
Right. Like
right.
He's a freaking yeah.
You'd think that the old version of himself would be weaker, right? So if he overtook Cloud's body, he not only has his powers, but he has Cloud's as well. So he should be stronger than the other one.
It's anybody's guess, right? Like, I know personally, I would love to see Zack come back. I would love to see Aerith survive, and Zack and Aerith get their happily ever after that they never got, because that was fucking heart-wrenching in Crisis Core. Like, that, dude... you want to talk about a tragic love story.
Well, talking about fan theories here, there's a relatively well backed up fan theory for Kingdom Hearts, which of course this has nothing to do with 7, but supposedly Sora is actually the son of Cloud and Aerith. Yeah. So that's a thought.
Which is kind of weird. She would have had to have given birth before she died, and we don't see any of that.
Well, I'm pretty sure that the Final Fantasy or the Kingdom Hearts timeline is totally different.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
Yeah, and Strix, I'm not sure exactly what you're referencing to me. Whatever. But, yeah,
he's saying, "God damn it!"
Sorry.
You took us. You ruined the Tifa Cloud ship. I don't know.
Oh yeah. So I don't know. I like we had a conversation in Discord the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Personally, I would do it for those 2 days together. But I also haven't
played Crisis Core.
So Zack has always been the side character I've never really cared too much about. I don't dislike the guy, but I don't have enough reason to be like, I like him more than Cloud. You know what I mean? So.
You might, after you play through Crisis Core. I did, because I was always a fan of Zack, but like after playing his game, I definitely am a much bigger fan of Zack than I am Cloud. Cloud's great, don't get me wrong, I love Cloud, but like Zack and Aerith just kind of fit in a really weird way. They're both very strange people, so I feel like their relationship makes a lot more sense. This is completely off basis, and like I hate shipping, but it's unimportant ultimately.
I mean, so Cloud is supposed to be that, like, he's not the best, right? Well, Zack is. Zack was that awesome first-class soldier that was effectively what Cloud is in this game, because Cloud thinks he's Zack. But yeah.
So here's the fucked up part. Here's the really fucked up part. This is gonna fuck your brain up, okay? Zack isn't better than Cloud. Cloud is the true master of the Buster Sword. Because, believe it or not, in Crisis Core, you have weapon proficiency after you get the Buster Sword. You can only max out at 95% as Zack. The game literally caps you at 95%. You cannot become 100% efficient with the Buster Sword in Crisis Core. You can, as Cloud in Remake, become 100% proficient with the Buster Sword. Why? I don't know, but like yes, Cloud isn't the soldier first class, but there's something about him that makes him special. And he's the only one, quote unquote, only one that can defeat Sephiroth. So
yeah, I mean, just like 1% said, he's also able to beat Sephiroth with no Mako injection. So
yeah,
I mean, that is a good point, because again, the developers of all of the Final Fantasy everything, they obviously realize that 95% is 100, and therefore one character is technically better in that regard. And just because you fuck your brain up and think you're the other character or the other guy doesn't mean you're suddenly become that guy and are as badass as he is, because he's a fucking badass in Final Fantasy VII. So
yeah, he is, dude. Just the fight scene alone at the end of the game with Sephiroth, that cutscene where he's fucking just everything about
it was pretty sweet. It made me want to watch Advent Children again, because that movie was awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's it laid out, dude. I think there's multiple copies of People. I think the timeline could get really, really heavily confusing. I think that's why the game's I think that's why the game's 2 discs, because they're telling 2 stories. They're telling Zack's story and Cloud's. I don't know, man.
It's 150 gigs, though. It's a massive game.
Yeah, I think it's 2 discs because they're trying to tell 2 stories, because they're trying to give you that point of convergence where this single action is what finally shuts down the timelines and creates this new reality where Cloud is Sephiroth, or potentially everything goes back to normal and Aerith dies as she's fated to. Like, she knows she's supposed to die.
Are you suggesting that if whichever story that you get or that you effectively choose, you put in the other disc?
No, I think that's going to be something that happens in the 3rd and final game. I think those choices are ultimately going to culminate at the end of Rebirth, after you've chosen, or if you have the option. I mean, they've said black and white, your actions in Rebirth will determine Aerith's fate. Like, they said that in their state of play. So like, that tells me right there we have some capability to change the outcome. How much? Who knows? But when ultimately a character dies and we're being told we can affect her fate, there's really only one opposite of death. And it's living.
I mean, so, I'm still messed up on the fact that Aerith has to die. It's necessary. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe because Zack's alive, but I don't know.
Dude, here's the thing too. Like, the part that makes me think I'm really on the right track here is a lot of the current fan theories that are out there. Square Enix had said that the fan theories out there currently, Square Enix has said that they're very happy with the fan theories, and that tells me they're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you there. When they're not going to be like, you guys are totally on track, and tell them that. Yeah.
Well, not even just that, but like, it tells me that they're buying the bait Square Enix is laying for them, right? Square Enix is happy because all of the work they've done to misdirect the fan base has been taken hook, line, and sinker. Like, everyone has bid it. I think I'm onto something. I could be way off base, and I won't be surprised or upset if I am. But I think I've got something here that is uniquely different of a perspective of what could be happening in these games. Because, dude, again, even the art alone suggests 3 timelines. Even the art.
Yeah, that's a beautiful art, and it's definitely... From what I've noticed on Twitter, when the art came out, everyone was stoked about the art just because it was pretty. Yeah. Really, pretty much that's it. You know, this is gorgeous fan art, or not fan art, but the official art. And it never really went past that. Yeah. But now that you mention it, you know, there's pretty clearly 3 different scenes at play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. So let me ask you then. So I still have yet to watch the state of play.
Yeah.
And I really haven't watched a whole lot on Rebirth. Should I not?
I think you should. I think you should, because it's intriguing, and you know, I like encouraging people to nitpick things, right? Like, theories are just that, they're theories, right? Like, if you watch it and see something completely different, or it can go, no, he's wrong because this, and you've got evidence to back it, awesome. Let me know. Like, anybody who's hearing this too, if you've got thoughts on why I'm wrong, and you've got scenes in the game on why I'm wrong, you've got actual stuff rather than just, well, my gut tells me you're wrong. Like, if you've got evidence to back up your claim. I want to hear it. I want to know what you guys think of my theory. I want to know if you think I'm onto something or if I'm just a fucking psycho watching paint dry, trying to connect dots. Like, I think the trailers out there, they don't show anything that spoils the game, personally. They did a really good job curating what they said at the State of Play. They did a really good job curating what they show in trailers and everything else. Well, Strix thinks I'm a psycho watching paint dry, so thanks. But he forgot the H, so I'm just a psycho. A psycho. A psycho. But I think you should watch it because there's some interesting scenes. They show off some great vistas. Graphically, it's gorgeous. I have to, after this podcast goes live, go dark for probably 6 months to avoid any spoilers because I don't want to know if I'm right.
It's gonna be hard. Yeah.
I want no information about Rebirth past this point. I don't want to know. I don't want to see. I want nothing until I can get it on PC and play it. Which, probably 18 months or so. So I'm guessing like mid next year. But
yeah, it's going to be hard being on Twitter and not seeing stuff.
Yeah.
I might have to just mute some people that I know are going to talk about it.
Just go dark for 3 months and you'll be fine. Like that's really about all it takes.
Yeah, it won't take terribly long for people to start talking about other games for sure.
But I don't know, man. Those are my thoughts. I think there's a lot of supporting evidence. I think it's a really fucking wild theory. I have no idea how Square Enix is going to tie it together at the end, where it's going to go. Like, that's the one thing I have no clue on. I'm taking a best guess based on the evidence I've got. I have no clue where this game is headed. But I can tell you that this evidence suggests that there is a convergence of 3 timelines happening. What that looks like, how much you play, how much you adjust, how much you control is up in the air. But that's my Final Fantasy VII remake trilogy theory. That's it.
Fan theory.
Yeah, that's my theory.
I mean, I'd say you've got enough evidence to make it plausible, and there's a lot there that I can see that if they're not going that route, they're going with something similar. I would definitely agree with 1% that it's going to be fun no matter what we do.
Yeah,
no matter what happens.
Yeah.
The real question is the fact that it's a Final Fantasy and that they've always been very directed storylines where you don't have really any say over what happens, you just experience it. It would be interesting to give us choices to really affect what happens. Yeah. And so I'm kind of leaning towards they wouldn't give us a choice. But of course, their marketing has suggested that we could.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just their way of redirecting us to make us think that we can. That way to make that scene more impactful again 20-some-odd years later. So
God damn you. It's like Hershabot all over again, which was like Aerith all over again, which is like Aerith all over again a second time. But
I would... Yeah. No, it'll definitely be fun. It's going to suck to not be able to buy it right away, to say the least.
Yeah, I really, of all the games that are releasing this year and have released already, this is one that I am really sad that I'm not going to have the chance to sit down and chomp and just play the fuck out of. But I will be so happy when it finally makes its way to PC.
Is Sephiroth the one that killed the president in the first game, in the original game?
Yep, he did kill the president in the original as well. Yep.
Do you think it has the fact that when he stabs Barrett here, and Barrett's got those ethereal stuff, the whisper effectively coming out of him, so did the president?
Yeah. They do at the very end, the guy says Mr. Vice President, and he ignores him. Rufus ignores him, and then the other guy says Mr. President. He goes, that's the one, or whatever. That does suggest that the president's dead, but again, you never see his body anywhere. Yeah.
I wonder what kind of difference that might make too. I don't know.
It's a big question. I don't know why they went with this bloodless style. I mean, they did the same thing in Crisis Core Reunion, where like the Niflheim scene, the Nibelheim scene, there's no blood in that scene either. But here's the wild thing, dude. Here's the really wild thing. They've established there's no blood. Barrett got stabbed, and there's no blood. Go back and watch, I think it was the Games Fest 2023 trailer. Go watch the new trailers for Rebirth. When Sephiroth attacks Tifa, there is blood. What the fuck does that mean?
You can also look at Intermission, the very end of the game, the DLC. the other guy, whatever the hell his name is, he's new to intermission, but he gets stabbed several times, and Yuffie actually gets blood on her face because she's like standing next to him.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're afraid to shy away from blood.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely different.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I realize that if you don't like Final Fantasy VII, you're kind of shit out of luck this week.
Sorry. There is some news to talk about. I guess we're going to do that on the Patreon side.
We can quick fire some of them real quick if you've got them on hand. I mean, we're at about an hour and a half, or hour 12 in, so let's just rapid fire some quick ones if you got them at your fingertips.
I do. So the big thing was Nintendo had a direct this week, and they confirmed that the Microsoft games that are coming to their platform. For them, it's only 2. It's going to be Grounded and Pentiment. Pentiment is like a medieval / humor-ish type game. Grounded is the survival game. It's like a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Those 2 are also coming to PlayStation 4 and 5, and PlayStation 5 is also getting Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves. So we were correct, except for a few other games. But long story short, over the course of the last week since they announced this, Microsoft has basically been saying that, nope, that it's going to be a case-by-case basis, but don't ever talk about exclusives again, more or less. So we'll see. Elden Ring's DLC was finally shown off. It's coming out in June, the end of June. PlayStation VR 2 is I can't say it's getting official PC support, but PlayStation is looking into PC support for PC VR or PSVR 2, which makes complete sense. It's a good way to sell the system and hopefully get more games.
Yeah, I mean, if the system can be used on the PS5 as well as the PC, why the fuck not?
Yeah, right. It'd be a way to sell more units, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It'll be cool to see if it happens. It'd be really exciting because then I can buy one and use it on my PC as well. And then really the last one was this game was announced like Thursday or Friday. It's called Kingmakers. And it's a medieval, it looks like a Total War style game almost at first. Giant massive armies, battles was going on, and they start talking about this guy, once you see him you're already dead. They don't know where he came from. And then it turns into Evil Dead. Next thing you know, you've got a modern soldier with like vehicles and M16s and tanks and shit, and you're killing people from the medieval times, and you're like, what the hell? Like I don't think I've ever gotten more whiplash when a video game changed gears than this one.
Yeah.
And I'm instantly interested because Evil Dead's amazing, and you can definitely tell they're taking some inspiration from it. But,
yeah, I was a little disappointed when the character stepped out of the car and it wasn't Bruce Campbell, but yeah. when he's driving that car and he just teleports, I'm like, oh my god, are they making an Evil Dead Army of Darkness game? And I'm like, oh no, but it's definitely, it would be awesome. Definitely inspired by.
If it doesn't have a scene where he's showing off his boomstick, I'm going to be really sad.
Agreed. All right.
That's basically it for the week. Quick fired.
Well, we are going to head over to our Patreon side, guys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Again, please let me know your thoughts on this episode. Hit us up on Discord. Hit us up on Patreon at patreon.com/coindroppod. Just come over and say you're a fucking idiot and you're watching paint dry. I don't know. Just let me know something. Say something. Hope you enjoyed the show. And Patreon will be right back with you. And Tim, I think you've got a special word for our listeners. Tell your mom I said hi.
Oh, yeah.